Hey guys, welcome to the Pilot Talk podcast, the podcast where we focus on aviation-related subjects ranging from how you can get started with your pilot education to career advice for pilots and the latest news from the aviation industry. Today we got a really exciting episode coming up, and what are we going to talk about today, Michel?
Oh my God, I'm excited. I don't know if I can speak. We're going to talk. It's a big one. It's got a lot of sections and a lot of information to be given. But we're going to talk about the airline interview, what to expect. So you're going for your first interview. You've been lucky. You've been chosen. And what exactly it's going to entice,
Yeah. What can you expect when you get there? And we've gotten this question from a lot of our followers.
Have we?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Yeah. It's going to be interesting because there's a lot of meat in there. And we're not saying that this is going to be the normal pattern, but I think that the major leagues, the big boys out there are they do have a big selection process, if you want, and we're going to go through all that today.
Nice.
Yeah.
You are listening to Pilot Talk by OSM Aviation.
All right. Michel, airline interview time. You got the invitation. Finally, dream job is on the horizon. It's within your reach.
You've been sending your CVs to everybody, and then you got that special email that says, "Hey, you're invited."
Nice.
Yeah. You remember when you went through your first interview?
Oh, man, it's been a few up until this point. But yeah I think over time it becomes less stressful.
Yeah.
Or, you're just more comfortable in that setting.
Sure. Yeah.
But what I think back to my first interview, it would have been really helpful to have a podcast like this to listen to beforehand.
It would help.
Because then you'd know what to expect to a certain extent, and that kind of makes it easier to prepare.
Yeah, and it's not that complicated because most of the time you already have what it takes to go through an interview. I mean, it's all about yourself. It's all about your experience, and it's just knowing the ins and outs of the subtle things that they're looking for in an interview, basically. So I think that once you know that, like you said, I mean, it definitely would help.
And I think it's so great that you bring that up because that's what I always remind our alumni of, because when they get that first invitation for an interview and they go, it's the first interview, I'm a little bit nervous. I always tell them hey, you know what? They want to hire you.
Yeah.
They already want to hire you. So all you got to do when you show up is to prove that you have what you already have, that you have what it takes. Yeah. You know what I think is the most difficult for many, where most people fall short or where they struggle, is the HR part. That's what surprised me, actually, because, a lot of focus is put towards the technical parts, as it should, the knowledge and all that stuff.
True.
A lot of effort is put into preparing for the simulator.
Yeah.
And then some people forget to think about those human resource questions like, why do you want this job? Why do you want to work for us?
Right.
What can you do to contribute to the success of our company?
Yeah.
And, if you haven't thought those things through, it can become a little bit broken up and, you might not find the best examples as you're sitting there on the spot. So it's really important to think about.
That's true. That's a very good point, actually. The other thing is almost like a mechanical thing. It's you've got it. But the HR could be an eye-opener. There's a lot of things that, depending of the HR department and who you're going to be working for, there definitely is. They've got a profile they've got already set, and so they want to make sure that you fit that profile, basically.
Yeah. To make sure you match the culture in their company, right?
Exactly. So there is a bit of research to be done on that. So before you go into your interview, I definitely would do some research and look. If I fly for a German airline, then I would go to that website and try to find as much information I can. So because you don't know, they could be asking you what kind of airplanes do we fly and how many do we have? What's our route structure? What do you know about the airline sort of thing? So
exactly.
Yeah, but most of the time, I think that with my experience, when we did interviews, we had an HR person next to me, and so we were only two in the interview room, and so she basically would, or he, I say she, but most of the HR people that I know are females, but they would have their set of questions, and I had my set of questions. I was more in technical, more of the actual flying bit experience, and she was more into the profile and make sure that you fit the bill.
Yeah.
So they look at they're all competency based questions. So they want to make sure that first of all that you can. First of all, maybe you're a good organizer. So they'll ask you a question about how you organize yourself. How did you get prepared for this interview? Yeah. So that shows already how you organized. They look at your communication. They look at how can you express yourself in English. Yeah. There's a lot of things that they've got a set questions already set up, and it gives them a really good profile on yourself. And can you prepare? Yeah, I guess you can prepare.
Yeah, I think so. Absolutely. Like you said, I think that was really good advice. Go to the website, research the company, what kind of planes do they fly, what kind of routes do they have. And also, today, follow them on social media. Yeah, exactly. Follow them on LinkedIn, follow them on Facebook, see what's going on, because they're probably going to ask you what's the recent developments at our company as well.
True, absolutely.
And if you don't know that, then you come across as not interested, like maybe you even come across as lazy, or, okay, here is a person that didn't take the time to research us, to look at this job, and that leaves the interviewer with a sense of, well, he or she doesn't really want the job, right? Yeah. And you want to avoid.
That's right.
It's your job. It's your job to prove to them that, hey, I really want this job. I'm here because I'm committed to getting this job. So true.
So true. I mean, that's the last thing you want to do is show that you haven't done your research, you haven't prepared yourself. So the more preparation, the more time you put into it, the better it is. I would even go to LinkedIn and find a pilot that flies for that airline and connect with him and say, listen, I'm scheduled for an interview and I need a bit of pointers. This is the question I've got, and I'm sure the pilot will be happy to answer you.
Nice.
So the more effort you put in, I think the better chance you have to be successful.
Yeah, and just think outside the box. I like that idea. That's a really good advice.
Yeah, thanks.
Pilot Talk with Stein Mjotvid and Michel Treskin.
And I think, for us, the alumni that graduate from OSM Aviation Academy, we have an alumni group. So every alumni gets put into that group. It's a closed group only for them.
Yeah.
And they can ask each other. So when someone gets an interview, they can go, hey, who works for this airline? Do you guys have any advice for me? And they help each other out. So it's a community that supports each other.
That's great. That's a good, that's the first time I hear about it. And I think it's a great idea.
Yeah. It works really well.
It has to. Great stuff. Plus, once you've done the HR interview, I mean, there's lots. There's some people give them in a technical interview, like when I interview someone, if I interview a pilot, I want to know if he's first of all a good pilot. So I ask him a lot of questions about his flying experience. Tell me a time where you had to divert. Tell me a time where you had to do a medical emergency. Tell me a time where you had if you're a first officer and you're going for a first officer job, I'll ask him if is he assertive? Is he, is he a quitter? Can he persevere and not say, listen, I give up, I don't have any solution? Is he able to think outside the box? I'm asking a lot of questions like that relate to flying, and if he has the experience. If I'm talking to a cadet, then I ask him, tell me about your first solo. Tell me about, have you ever had a bad instructor? Have you ever corrected an instructor? So depending on the level of experience he's got in the cockpit, the questions will be taken into consideration.
So you adapt to the level of the person sitting in front of you.
Absolutely. I'm not going to ask a cadet, tell me about your first diversion or your medical emergency or things like that. Give me a CRM example, crew resource management. So, no, I always adapt myself to the level of the candidate that's being interviewed.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of research on my part. There's a lot of research in the HR part as well. That's why they have this big application program, and you have to put everything on it. Make sure that you've got all the right information.
Yeah.
Make sure that you are honest.
Yeah.
Do not lie on your time that you have on your logbook. Don't try to falsify it and all stuff, because
Is that a common thing that happens?
it does. I've seen it a couple of times. Several times I would say. But you don't see it that much. But it depends which country we're looking at.
I heard about that too when I did one of my many skill tests at this point. But I did a skill test in Florida for my commercial pilot license, and the examiner told me about a guy that did a CPL skill test, and then he came back, a year later to do his ATP. And he had gained an unreasonable amount of hours. Like he would just have to have been flying like 24/7. And even then he would fall short to what was stated in the logbook. So yeah, I guess it does happen, right?
I guess some people are desperate and they will do things like that. But it's in the long run, 'cause it's going to catch up.
Yeah.
It doesn't work out.
No, it gets noticed.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, we're not that stupid.
No.
People that are in that department and in that job position, they are expert in the subject, so they know exactly what they're talking about.
Yeah, yeah.
Sometimes we will be asked to do a technical interview, where I was before in the Middle Eastern company. We didn't do technical interviews. We just by interviewing him on his flying experience, I would know right away if he was knowledgeable on the systems. So if there is a technical interview, then depending if the guy is coming in for a type specific, if he's coming for a Boeing position, then I'm going through a Boeing sort of questionnaire that I have.
Yeah.
Like, tell me about what's your max takeoff weight on a 737, what a touchdown zone is, things like that. Things that are nice, things that are neat to know if you're a pilot on a Boeing. It's the same thing if you're an Airbus, if you're an Embraer. They're almost identical questions, except just a little bit more type specific.
Yeah.
But, I don't need to spend that much time on talking about aviation with someone specifically on type to know if he knows what he's talking about. What altitude can you start at an APU? What's the maximum altitude can you start the APU?
Yeah.
If he doesn't know that, then we got a problem.
Yeah.
Our VSM altitudes, what altitude does it start and when does it finish? There's a set of altitude.
Yeah.
Generator failure. What happens then? Things like that. So it's not really. It's things that you expect everybody to know if they're in that kind of position. So it's not that bad. It's not that. And there's some books that you can get and prepare.
Yeah. And that's this is, I think, is an interesting distinction because, like you said, if they come in for the interview and they're already type rated on the Boeing 737 or the A320, they should know, they should have a lot of knowledge about that aircraft and about the procedures for that aircraft. But if it's a cadet that comes in, and I've heard that this is for them a point of uncertainty. They go, oh well, I'm going to interview for a Boeing 737 job, or, I'm going to interview for a job on the Dash 8, but I don't have a type rating on the aircraft.
Right.
This will be my first type rating. What am I expected to know about the aircraft?
Yeah.
And here I think it differs a little bit based on the interviewer, because I've heard some interviewers saying that, we expect, if you're interviewing for the Dash 8, we expect them at least to know more than it has 2 engines and it's a turboprop.
Right.
Like do a little bit of research. What's the seat configuration? How many cabin crew, learn about the engines, have some more details to say about the engines. And, if it's like the Dash 8, it's a high wing turboprop with a T-tail.
Yeah.
Then review the principles of flight that talks about what are the stall characteristics of a T-tail aircraft. What are the risks with that type of aircraft. So every step that you take that is above what is expected will give the interviewer a stronger sense of here is a person and he or she is very hungry for this job.
Yeah, I totally agree.
And I think in that aspect, the advice that you gave earlier, try to find a pilot on LinkedIn that flies this aircraft, or even better, flies for this company. That can enable you to really learn more than you could find researching the internet.
Exactly. I totally agree with you. I mean, it's not a rocket science. I mean, if you're a cadet and you're going to go for an Airbus or Boeing or Embraer or whatever, you can go out there and research, at least know a little bit more about the aircraft and, characteristics of flight and things like that. Yeah. I mean, you don't have to go into depth and things like that. If I know I have a cadet in front of me who's going to go for a Boeing job, I'm not going to ask him some specific type. Really,
you're not going to ask him, hey, what's the nose wheel tire pressure of the Boeing?
Yeah. What's the maximum speed for landing gear retraction or something? Yeah, okay. I would if I have a cadet, it's simple. I always ask him, tell me about what you know about the aircraft. But just by listening to him talk about the aircraft and seeing what he's saying, I maybe ask him another question, something related to what he knows, and to see if he's been into the detail a little bit. But that's about it. Cadets, I mean, it's you have to be realistic if you're an interviewer. Yeah.
What do you feel about bluffing? So let's say that you're interviewing me and you go, hey, Stein, what's the nose wheel tire pressure of a Boeing 737? I go, oh, it's
56.
It's got to be 400 PSI. I think it's like 200, right? Yeah. But then I'm just confidently trying to bluff my way out of it. Yeah. Well, what kind of image does that give you?
Not very good.
Not very good, right?
No.
It would be way better if I just go, I actually don't know that.
No,
but I will look it up right after this interview. You can bet that I will.
That's right. I know where to find it.
Yeah.
If I ask him, if the guy gives me an answer on a question that it's not a need to know question, need to know answer, and he gives me the answer, well, my eyebrows would be standing up and say, "What the hell? How does he know that?" I mean, like how many blades is there on the first stage of the compressor on a Pratt & Whitney 777 engine or something? It's 56, but it doesn't matter. But but if he knows that, then either he's bang on or he's bullshitting me. Excuse my French, but yeah. No, you got to take it with a grain of salt. And again, if it's your first interview, you're a cadet. Do your job. Do some research. Don't come in cold. Yeah. Look at it. And like you said, there's a lot of ways of getting some information without knowing people. You can ask. Yeah. You can research a little bit, and you'll get it. For those that are type rated and all that stuff, I mean, you should know what you're talking about. Yeah, definitely. And we're not going to go into the depth and all stuff without books and all in front of us, because if I do a command upgrade and things like that, then we've got books, we got flight plans, we look at a lot of things, we ask a lot of questions that are very specific for someone who has that experience level. Yeah. So I mean, it's the HR interview is quite easy. The technical interview, if you've never had one and it's a type rated, then you got to get yourself prepared. There are books out there on the market that you can find to refresh your memory. Yeah, and that's it. I mean, there's nothing much you can do about it, and don't try to like you say, bluff your way through it, because we're gonna know about it.
Yeah, and on that, I think one thing that comes to my mind is, what is the area in your experience where the most people fall short or get stumped or, do a poor job in terms of, HR, technical, those? Yeah.
HR interview, I really can't put a finger on a specific. HR interview basically is more of the personality, your character, the way you present yourself, the way you answer your questions, and if you don't know the answer, you just tell me, listen, I don't, or I can't remember anything right now. But it all depends of the interviewer. If the interviewer is an interviewer who has taken an interview course, who's actually qualified, and who HR, don't forget, they're not pilots, so if they ask you a lot of flying questions, they shouldn't, because they're not really specifically experts in the subject matter. And that's why when we did interviews, we always had a pilot next to us, or an HR. So we were a combination. So
and work as a team.
As a team. So if there was any, if she would ask, or if the HR would ask a flying question, and he would answer, he or she would probably record the answer, and then after the interview, she would ask me, or he would ask me, how was he right? Was he eventually, after doing so many interviews, the HR person will get experience and she'll know what RVSM means or you know, emergency descent and decompression and stuff like that are more important.
So the more generic, non-complex questions could be done by an experienced HR person with aviation support from pilots.
That's right. Yeah. So when you do an HR interview and there's only an HR person there, you know, remember, she's not an expert in the subject matter. She knows about it, or he knows. I always say she, and I'm sorry about that. You know, he or she will have some experience, but not like a pilot interviewer. You know, so as the HR interview, I mean, you got to really, you got to screw up pretty bad to fail it. I mean, if you don't fit the bill, then you don't fit the bill.
Yeah, I think for the HR part, what I've heard from interviewers is that often, especially young people going for their first job, they struggle sometimes on the HR part with opening up and being honest and showing who they are. So, you know, if you're not sharing or being open, the interviewers might get an image of you where you're reserved, or, you know, it's like, you know, they can't really get under your skin. So I think that's why it's important to think about these questions beforehand, so you have an idea of what you guys are going to be talking about and you're able to open up.
That's a very good point. I like that. That you reminded me that yes, you need to review inside. You need to prepare answers to questions that they're going to come up to it. You know, they're going to definitely ask you some question about teamwork, about leadership, things that are important to be when you become a pilot and to become a commander of an aircraft. So yeah, it's very important that before you come in. To get almost yourself ready to have some examples to support your personality and, you know, the way you function. Yeah. Absolutely. And there's nothing wrong being, you know, if you're introvert and you are more quieter than the extrovert. You know, we there's no distinction. We'll take an introvert, we'll take an extrovert. Doesn't matter what type of personality you are. I mean, it's just as long as you are honest and you're capable of expressing yourself honestly and easy. I mean, it becomes, you know, second nature when you do an interview, basically.
It's very well said.
Yeah. The technical is a bit more complicated.
Yeah.
Some preparation there. But.
Are there some general like areas that you see where people are struggling the most? Is it like, you know, systems knowledge? Is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's system. It's all system related. When I do a technical, I'll take a question on generator. I'll take a question on hydraulic. I'll take a question on the oxygen system. I'll take a question on the fuel system. I'll take a question on you know. It's all like you said, system. I mean, it could be you know, the landing gear. Yeah. It could be the anti-icing system, the bleed system. It's things that we need to know.
Yeah.
I mean, knowledge is such an important part of being a pilot.
Yeah, knowledge, skills, and attitude. Right?
Absolutely. So attitude is your HR, and then your knowledge is your technical, if you want to take it like that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and then the skills. How does that get evaluated?
Oh, well, we put them in the sim.
Put them in the sim.
The old dreaded sim. Yeah, in the box, yeah. And, you know, the sim will count for about 80% of their total mark, if not more.
Yeah.
So sim, how do we prepare for sim?
Pilot Talk, available on iTunes, Spotify, or osmaviation.com/podcast.
You know what? This actually really cool at OSM Aviation Academy. And now, I don't mean to be talking about ourselves again, but I'm really excited about this because in 2014, we launched something called Career Support.
Oh, right.
So it means that whenever one of our students get an interview, their first interview, they can come back and we do simulator training with them at no extra cost.
Brilliant.
And they can do that for as many interviews until they land their first job.
Wow.
You know, most of the time, you know, our students are really good and they nail that first job, but every now and then they're unsuccessful on the first interview and they got to go again. And that could be many reasons. Often it's actually not the simulator. It's usually like we talked about, not opening up and that kind of stuff. So, but yeah, flying the simulator, just keeping current flying. I think that's, you know, because, you know, when you have a bit more experience, it doesn't have that big of an impact. Like your skills will not deteriorate as quickly over time.
True.
Because you have that experience to rely on. But if you're brand new, fresh out of flight school, it's not like riding a bike. You got to keep current. You know, if that means flying flight sim at home or being active at your local flying club or flying parachute jumpers, it's something like you just got to keep flying. You got to keep your skills fresh and keep your instrument scan at a high proficiency level.
Especially.
You know? Especially that, right? Wouldn't you agree? Like the scanning technique.
I totally agree. Well, you know, at the Academy, the OSM Academy, we have actually the mentorship. And one of the parts of the mentorship is that I come in and I put the cadets in the sim. We pretend that they're being assessed.
Yeah. That's such a great asset. You know what I mean? Like, I spoke to the guys and girls that did that the last time, and they enjoyed it so much.
Oh, yeah. It's an eye-opener.
Yeah, and it takes some of that pressure away because now when they go to the first assessment, they know, okay, well, I've got a general idea of what I can expect.
That's right. Yeah. And as a cadet, I mean, if you're going to be a simulator assessed on a 7-3 as a cadet, I mean, it's, you know, review your system. You did the MCC course probably on 7-3 or an Airbus. It doesn't matter. I mean, an airplane's an airplane. And if you're going to be a cadet and they're going to put you in the sim on a specific like a 7-3 or an Airbus, you know, they're not going to ask you you're not going to ask you to show them how to fly an Airbus. They're just going to see if you have the flying skills and you can be trained. Are you trainable? That's a big thing to remember. They've got 40, 70 sectors to train you. They want to make sure that you will be trained within this time frame. And if they can't see any improvement after, 45 minutes of sim, that's where the sim will be unsuccessful.
Yeah.
If you're a cadet, if you're a type rated already, or you've got 1,000 hours under your belt, then they'll ask you a bit more complicated exercise, as like a V1 cut, where they cut an engine after your just prior to rotation speed or something. A bit more complex stuff.
Yeah, and then for the non-pilots listening, V1 cut is a tricky situation because it comes right at the worst possible time during the takeoff.
Yeah. V1 is a decision speed. So at V1, if you're not in a situation where you can fly away, then you normally stop before V1. But after V1, basically that's your decision. You're going. It doesn't matter if you're on fire. You're still going after V1. So they will give you an engine failure. They will give you something that will require you to get the aircraft up in the air, and now use the checklists and do whatever procedures and SOPs that are set.
There's a really good video on this online. Have you seen the one, I think it's TUI Fly, that flies out of Manchester and they get an engine fire?
No, it isn't.
And they keep going and they got the audio, everything. They're so professional. They deal with it in such a great manner. We got to check that out afterwards. It's a really good clip.
Maybe we could relate it, put it together with the podcast.
Yeah, we should. Yeah, we'll put it up on our Instagram account, the Pilot Talk podcast on Instagram.
That's a good idea.
Post a clip there.
A good example. As soon as I think of fire after V1. I think of the Concorde. They were on fire, and even though there was a lot of runway left and all that stuff, they were past V1. They're massively on fire, uncontrollable fire, and they took it in the air. That's the way they're trained. That's the way we're trained. Yeah. We're trained for that.
Yeah, so they did the right thing, but the damage was so severe that it was...
No, they were out of control. The fuel was on fire. There was nothing they could do.
That's the one where there was debris on the runway, right?
Yeah. And they punctured the wheel went over it, and they punctured the fuel tank, and then a severe leak, and that lit up because they're on afterburner. The engines are they're lit up in the back with a large fire, and that's what propels the aircraft at supersonic speed. It was tragic.
Yeah.
Terrible. But anyways.
Back to the assessment, right?
Back to the assessment.
That's the good thing about the simulator. Won't catch on fire. Well, if they can simulate it.
Absolutely.
So we'll let it, if we want to try and summarize it, this is my image of a typical simulator assessment. Yeah. Even for someone that doesn't have experience on type, is that you would usually... you do a normal takeoff. You follow a standard instrument departure procedure.
If they're depending, if it's a, you got to be specific here, almost like if he's ab initio, 0 time, he's got a 250 hour. I would ask that guy just to do a normal takeoff straight ahead
on a heading,
to an altitude, and then
and then keep going from there. And usually the next step is to do some air work to see that you have your scan going, just like climb to an altitude, level off, do some turns, maybe do some steep turns.
Yeah.
You know, would you have them do a stall or something like that?
No.
Or no. It's usually just to see that they control the aircraft smoothly, correct?
Yeah, I just ask them to level off at an altitude, and I'll tell them, listen, show me a 500. Let's do a 500-foot descent at that speed, and I want you to continue a turn, a 30-degree bank turn to a certain heading. So it's I load them up a little bit. They have to maintain a rate of descent or rate of a climb, maintain the bank turn, and maintaining speed. Yeah. And no automatics. So they've got, and they got no flight director. So they got no aid to help them. So they're actually flying just like a big Cessna 172, like they did when they were being trained, basically.
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
And then after the air work, next step is typically then to navigate to a navigation aid. It could be an NDB, could be a VOR, go into a hold. Something like that. Yeah,
it could be like that. Something like that. Again, I like to give them a sort of a radar vector right away to a precision approach. The problem with the simulator is, depending on the simulator, if it's a level D simulator, which is a level D like Delta, which is a full motion, then it costs a lot of money. So you won't spend too much time in the sim. If it's fixed base, there is no motion. It's all visual, which is approved as an assessment tool, then I could do a bit. I got a bit more time if you want to do things like that, just like show me a hole or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, I think what you could do as well is just tell them to navigate to the nav aid, enter the hold, and then depending on what airport you're at, the hold could be a course reversal or a racetrack back onto the approach, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So, you can use it to...
Not spending time in the hold, you're just showing that you can do a proper entry.
You know what you got an air picture.
Yeah. You got situational awareness.
That's right, exactly. Yeah, you're totally right. I mean, you can send it to a hole and then prepare for the approach.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah, and then what happens then? Then you fly the approach, and you said first a precision approach, so that would mean instrument or ILS approach.
Well, we don't have that many precision approach, but the ILS is probably the one most, even though they only have 200 hours, 250 hours.
Because they're familiar with that.
Yeah, they're familiar with that. Yeah. It doesn't matter if it's an ILS on a 72 or an ILS on the DA 142 or anything, or a helicopter. It doesn't matter. An ILS is an ILS. It's got a localizer and a glide slope. So, but they do a full, they do a 2-engine precision approach, no automatics. That means no auto thrusts, no flight director. It's all scan basically. You got a primary flight display, and it has all the information on that. So you don't have to. There's not that much scan, but a lot of people can't do that without automatics.
Yeah, and for those that are non-pilots, the flight director is pretty much a crosshair on your instrument that shows you exactly how to fly.
That's right. That's right.
But if it's not there, then you need to take in all the information: your altitude, your speed, your rate of descent, your localizer, and glide slope, and potential deviations on those instruments. And you got to pull in all the information and act accordingly.
That's right. Yeah, you set your own attitude.
Yeah.
So your flight director tells you exactly where to put the attitude of the aircraft, where to put the aircraft. Yeah. But if you don't have it, then it's up to you to take whatever action it is to maintain whatever whatever situation you want to maintain.
Makes sense to be assessed in that way, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everybody can fly on automatics.
Yeah.
Anybody. I mean, I can put my mother there, who's 96 years old, and I put the automatics, and she doesn't have to do anything. It's just have to spin the dial basically to change the speed, spin the dial to change the altitude and the heading. I mean, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
So once we've done that, so if he's an advanced pilot, then instead of doing a 2-engine, then we probably would do, we would do a 2-engine, but we would probably maybe ask him just to do a localizer approach only.
Yeah, so non-precision.
A non-precision.
Don't get the vertical.
That's right. So he's got to plan his descent to the misapproach point, if you want. And then on the, I always try not to give them the visual to the runway as they're coming down the approach.
Okay.
Because I'd like to see how their decision is. Can they make a quick decision, go around?
Yeah.
If they're advanced, I'll give them an engine failure on the go around.
Yeah.
And if they're cadets, I'll just stop it right away as soon as they go into the go around. I just want to see
Yeah.
them to do the action, basically, or take the decision.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
So,
some people will continue.
oh, wow.
Yeah,
That's,
yeah, I've seen that. Seen it all.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Because for those that are non-pilots, once again, listening, what we do when we fly an approach down to an airport is that we have a missed approach point or a decision altitude if it's a
Precision
three-dimensional approach or a precision approach. And if we cannot see the runway environment, the approach lights, the threshold, something that enables us to recognize the airport, then we have to make the decision to go around.
That's right.
Apply full power, start cleaning up the aircraft. And when I say cleaning up, I mean retracting the gear, retracting the flaps. And then we come back, either we come back around for another attempt or we have to divert to somewhere else where the weather is better.
That's right.
Right. So
fuel permitting as well.
Yeah. And this is a high workload situation. So,
Huge.
And oh my goodness, it's important, all the more important that the skills are there to do it appropriately.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just the pilot flying, it's pilot monitoring as well. Because when you go into an assessment like that, you'll be assessed as a pilot flying, and also you'll be assessed as a pilot monitoring.
Yeah.
Can you actually assist? Can you support the guy flying, the pilot flying?
Yeah.
It's huge. So the mark is I've failed guys for pilot monitoring. He's a good pilot, but he can't monitor.
Yeah. Because as the pilot monitoring, that his or her duty will be to call out any deviation, to call out the next steps, right?
Exactly.
And a wise pilot once said that asked me what are the most important things when you're flying, and the answer is the next two things. So what is coming up, staying ahead of the aircraft, and
anticipation.
Yeah, anticipation. And I think at some airports, like if you're flying into Brussels, you have the ILS there with all the speed restrictions, right? So you have 3 different speed restrictions on the approach coming in. So meaning that if you brief the whole approach with the speed restrictions and everything, and talk through the missed approach procedure, when you come to the point where you're about to go around to make that decision, it'll be a good idea for the pilot monitoring to refresh your memory and be like, okay, if we got to go missed now, you're climbing to 1,500 feet, turning to this heading, and then we're going to go back to the VOR or something to keep it top of mind, right?
4 eyes are better than 2.
Exactly.
And 2 brains are better than 1. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Pilot monitoring is as important as a pilot flying. And he's there to help. He's there to make sure that the pilot flying is able to cope with things coming and staying ahead of the aircraft. And you're totally right. I mean, it's I feel that that pilot monitoring is as important as a pilot flying, and that the duties are, even though you're not flying, your duties are as important as a guy who's flying. Big time.
Yeah.
Big time.
Definitely. Got to give all the support you can.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, simulator assessment, you can almost sit down and prepare yourself. You should know how to fly an airplane. It doesn't matter which airplane it is. It's just, we're talking about a heavier, we're talking about inertia combined with that. But the assessment itself, I know it's nerve-wracking. I know but if you got someone next to you that can support you properly and knows, you know the steps. If you have an emergency, aviate, navigate, communicate, you know exactly what to do.
There you go.
Easy peasy.
Lemon squeezy.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly.
Pilot Talk. Everything you need to know about being a pilot.
So if, similar assessment will take about 45, 30 minutes, depending of your, again, level of experience, depending of the profile. And then basically some companies have a group exercise.
Group exercise. And what does that entail?
Well, it's a group.
Yeah, they do an exercise.
They give you an exercise.
I've heard a few examples. I know that some airlines will give you just a task to complete as a group, basically. Right. And then as you progress through the task, they'll throw in a curveball. So they'll say, okay, now you need to change the way you solve this problem, or now this additional information has come in. And obviously, the whole point is to simulate something close to a airline environment, an operative environment, where, as you know very well, we're out there flying on the line, and just like we spoke about earlier, you press play, but then you don't really know what's going to happen. Unforeseen events are going to come up, and you're going to have to deal with them accordingly. So then as the group gets new information, they got to adapt to that information. They got to communicate with each other. They got to collectively problem solve. and move the exercise forward
and decision made. That's right.
Yeah, make decisions and do it in a communicative way.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. The exercise will have some kind of solution.
Yeah,
and you work as a team, and it's good because if you have different, the people that they put in the group exercise, not more than 4 maybe per group. But you could have a South African there. You can have an Australian. You can have a French.
Yeah.
You can have a Russian. I mean, it's a teamwork exercise. They want to see how do you work together. How you can, like you said, find a solution. And if there is a curveball, that how to work together, think outside the box. And so basically, we observe you do that exercise. We look at everything. We look how you communicate. If you're silent and you don't say a word during the exercise, and your colleagues are not helping you, say, listen, what do you think? And then things like that, and they leave you alone. We can't score you. We can't evaluate if you are actually a crew. You can do some CRM.
Yeah. So you need to participate.
You need to participate. Not over participate.
There we go. There's a balance in that here too.
You can't just take control. There's nothing wrong being a leader.
Yeah.
But you need to be a leader where you can actually listen to your followers and get feedback.
Yeah. You need to be inclusive.
Yeah, absolutely. The first officer has 49% of the vote.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And so, and then, so if I go into a group exercise and I'm like, all right, guys, this is how it's going to be, slamming my hand. Not good.
No good. And even though you're good in a sim, it's no good. That means that if you're going to be like that in the cockpit, when something happens, then I don't want you in the cockpit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a fine line.
Yeah.
If you're strong, assertive leader, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But you need to be able to also come down to the level of your other colleagues.
Yeah.
And include them in your solution.
And conversely, also, just like you said, if you're an introvert, you got to lean into it. You got to participate. You got to speak up and voice your opinion. And
nothing wrong with being an introvert.
No,
don't forget. There's a lot of airlines out there that will not take an introvert.
Yeah.
Because they're afraid that they're not going to speak up if something happens.
Yeah.
As long as you can be assertive when you're supposed to be assertive, then that's fine.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. So group exercise, some people do, some people don't. At OSM, when we do pilot selection, we do have a group exercise. And like you said, it's an exercise which is fun sometimes. It could be a tabletop flying exercise. That's what we normally do as well. So it's just we want to see how you participate, how you team play, and we don't care about the solution.
Yeah,
we just want to see how you work together.
Gotcha.
Right.
That's an important point to remember. Yeah, because many as problem solvers and as pilots, we want to get the right answer, right? We want to solve the problem.
Exactly.
So remember to enjoy the journey, and the process is part of the evaluation.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Perfect. Boom.
So what else? Is there anything else? We covered it all, or is there any other things that the pilots could encounter when they go for an interview?
Well, the psychometrics.
Yeah,
you're going to be psychometrically tested.
And we did a great episode on this. Episode 5 is about psychometric testing with Michael Keating, your boss, and he knows, he's very knowledgeable about this.
Extremely.
So tune into episode 5 if you haven't already. But psychometric testing. What does that entail? Just to cover that too. It's a series of questions. Yeah.
And they want to basically make sure that you are normal.
Yeah.
If I can say that word.
Yeah.
They're going to give you a series of questions, and it could be up to 300 questions. It will be analyzed by probably a computer and then reviewed by a psychologist, an aviation psychologist that's been EASA qualified and tested.
Yeah.
And there is a line that you need to be within, which is the normal pilot profile. And 9 people out of 10 is on that line. There's sometimes there's an exception always, and they want to identify that.
Yeah.
They want to make sure that we don't get someone that is not balanced in the cockpit. They want to avoid the accident that happened several years ago, where the first officer brought the airplane down with all the passengers. Tragic.
Yeah.
So it's not. You can definitely do some research on psychometrics. Preparation is hard because it's all up to you, the way you are.
Yeah. It's you can prepare to a certain level, but then it's you can't really change fundamentally who you are and the capacities you have.
Stein is Stein and Michel is Michel.
Yeah.
And don't try to sugarcoat it. Don't try to lie. Don't try to project yourself as someone else, because the test will show that.
Yeah.
And it will be invalid. And when we have invalid tests, we don't really stop it.
Yeah.
We don't take you, because
that's what it's there for, right?
Yeah, exactly. Identifies. And what else is there?
Well, I think language is important, right?
Oh man, yeah. We did just a side note. We went to Colombia to look for pilots, and I went to Bogota, and we had about 600 pilots that showed up the first day that we were there, and they all spoke English, really. But when the time came and we did some communication testing, they couldn't communicate under pressure.
Oh, see, there's a big. There's a big difference between sitting in a calm room like we are now, just conversing, talking, and being on final approach in a jet
on fire.
The one engine's on fire to doing 160 knots or whatever it is you're doing.
Yeah.
And different. Then the language, the listening and the speaking goes out the window much quicker, right?
Yeah. Well, listen, I'm sure you've been in your career as you had an emergency where you felt your heart racing and your blood pressure going up, and you had to keep cool as a cucumber when you talk to an air traffic controller. Yeah. And that's the big thing. And that's why, even though you can speak English and all that, but under pressure, when you do have high blood pressure and you feel that your heart is in your throat, and you have to be calm and explain exactly what you're going to be doing for the next 10 minutes, it has to be clear and concise, and it has to be understood. And that's why it's so critical that even though you can speak English, you are tested. And I look at that. I look at that when I put them in the sim and see how they communicate. So
under pressure.
Yeah, under pressure. Yeah, which is so important.
Yeah.
Because even though aviate, navigate, and communicate is the last part of your basically how to fly and how to fly basically as a pilot, communication is extremely important.
Yeah.
Should be able to communicate.
I agreed.
Yeah. So we do. So while you're being interviewed, while you're being assessed, if it's a 3-day assessment, it's a 1-day assessment, we, as assessors, we always look or listen. And I look at the lips, I look at how he speaks, I look at, and then I try to put him, I try to let him talk outside the aviation lingo.
Yeah.
Because every pilot can talk lingo, pilot, but sometimes they can't outside aviation. I like to get them to read the checklists. Sometimes people can speak English, but they can't read in English.
Yeah.
I've seen that a lot. They couldn't understand what the hell they're reading. So it's extremely important as well. So communication, So we do sort of a English testing as well. Crazy.
See, there's one bit, and I don't know how common this is, but I've seen some airlines doing the online testing, so computer-based. So they'll send you in the pre-screening part of the interview. So before you even come to the interview, they'll send you a link and go, hey, here's a test you need to complete beforehand. Yeah. And that could be, like you said, it could be a question bank of 250, 300 questions about yourself, where some of the questions are similar, and it will detect if you're inconsistent in how you describe yourself.
That's right.
It can also be like multitasking stuff. So
that's right,
a little bit of a video game. You got to solve math questions while you're doing some other tasks and that kind of stuff. So that's in some airlines they use that as a pre-screening, but not all of them do that.
No. OSM Academy has a sort of a pre-screening selection process as well.
We actually, they got to come on site, but we do have it accessible in many cities. It's called a pilot aptitude test.
Right.
And we do part one is computer based, but they can't do it from home yet, at least.
Right.
They got to come to one of our testing centers. But the good news is we got them everywhere in the UK, all over Scandinavia. Moving forward, there's probably going to be a testing center in the US as well. So there'll be plenty of opportunities to come and take the tests.
Right. And nowadays, like you said, the most airline will send you a sort of a pre-interview package where they would just want to make sure that you fit the bill before they bring you, because it's an investment. Most of the time the simulator is very expensive, so they want to make sure that you at least you're within the range of what they're looking for. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
All right. So if we try to summarize this with some good advice at the end, I guess, research the company.
Yeah.
Think outside the box.
Yep.
Take every resource available to you. Talk to other pilots. Search online. Follow them on social media, and come prepared.
Yeah.
Show up well dressed and groomed.
Beautiful.
Get a good night's sleep is important.
Absolutely.
And then, for the technical interview, make sure you study and know the things that you're supposed to know, but don't bluff.
Yeah, exactly.
If you get stumped, honesty is extremely important.
So you don't know.
Yeah, so you don't know. And then, for simulator, make sure that you're crisp, make sure that you've been flying recently. And if you haven't, rent a simulator. Or if you're an alumni from OSM Aviation Academy, you're part of the career support setup. So you can just contact us and we'll help you out. And remember, if you have an interview and you have been invited, they want to hire you. Now it's just up to you to take that last step and prove that they are right.
That you want the job. That's right. Exactly. Yeah. Preparation is key.
Preparation is key.
Yeah.
This is a really good episode, man. It was really interesting to hear your thoughts on this. I know how many selections, interviews, sim assessments you've done. It's
Scary.
It's amazing. I don't even want to know how many hours you've spent in a simulator.
No, I won't tell you.
But it's like tens of thousands. And being able to take part in your perspective, your experience, and your insights has been eye-opening for me.
My
Michel.
pleasure.
So
my pleasure.
Thank you. And on that note,
blue sky.
And happy landings.
Ciao.